Our planet is changing. From the highest mountain peaks to the deepest ocean trenches, a palpable sense of unease hangs in the air. The very ground beneath our feet seems unstable, prone to tremors and violent shifts. The skies, once a source of comfort and predictability, now unleash storms of terrifying intensity. Turn on the news and the headlines scream of unprecedented catastrophe. Wildfires rage across continents, leaving behind a trail of ash and despair. Hurricanes, once rare occurrences, now seem to appear with alarming regularity, their winds tearing apart communities and reshaping coastlines. This is not a scene from a Hollywood disaster film. This is our reality. The year 2024 has already etched its place in history as one of the most destructive on record. But beyond the immediate devastation, a more profound question arises. Are these isolated incidents or symptoms of a planet in distress? Are we simply witnessing the capricious nature of our planet? Or are these events a harbinger of something far more ominous? A sign that the delicate balance of our ecosystem has been irrevocably disrupted? The answers, it seems, are as complex and multifaceted as the challenges we face. For centuries, prophets of doom have warned of an impending apocalypse, a time of tribulation when the earth would be ravaged by fire, floods, and famine. These prophecies, often relegated to the realm of myth and religious fanaticism, are now being revisited with renewed interest. Can these ancient texts, written in a time before industrialization and climate change, truly offer insights into the events unfolding around us? Or are we simply projecting our fears and anxieties onto these cryptic verses, searching for meaning in the face of chaos? The parallels are certainly striking. The Book of Revelation, with its vivid descriptions of plagues, earthquakes, and celestial upheavals, resonates with an eerie familiarity as we witness the devastating consequences of a warming planet and escalating global conflicts. But is it fair to interpret these ancient texts literally, or are they meant to serve as allegorical warnings, urging us to confront the destructive tendencies within ourselves and our relationship with the natural world? The answer perhaps lies somewhere in between. While religious interpretations offer one lens through which to view these events, the scientific community provides a different, though no less alarming, perspective. The evidence is irrefutable. Our planet is warming at an unprecedented rate, and human activity is the primary driver. The consequences of this warming are already being felt across the globe, from the melting glaciers of the Arctic to the intensifying droughts plaguing sub-Saharan Africa. The delicate balance of our planet's ecosystems is being disrupted, leading to more extreme weather events, rising sea levels, and mass extinctions. But beyond the environmental impacts, there is a growing recognition that these natural disasters are inextricably linked to human conflict and social unrest. As resources become scarcer and competition for habitable land intensifies, the potential for conflict increases dramatically. This creates a vicious cycle. Climate change fuels conflict, which in turn exacerbates environmental degradation, leading to further instability and displacement. Breaking this cycle requires a fundamental shift in our understanding of the interconnectedness of these issues and a commitment to addressing the root causes. The year 2024 began with ominous tremors, a stark reminder of nature's raw power. In January, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake ripped through the Hindu Kush region, reducing villages to rubble. February brought Cyclone Freddy, a storm of unprecedented longevity, wreaking havoc across the Indian Ocean. Freddy lashed Madagascar, Mauritius, and Reunion with torrential rains and howling winds. Spring saw catastrophic floods submerge vast swathes of China's southern provinces. Cities were brought to a standstill, their streets transformed into raging torrents. These events exposed a deeper truth. The era of predictable weather patterns was over. Earthquakes plagued the planet with increasing frequency in 2024. In April, a magnitude 7.2 quake struck off Japan's coast, triggering a tsunami. The early warning system saved lives, but the threat along the Pacific Ring of Fire remained. In May, a magnitude 7.6 quake struck Kashmir, reducing villages to rubble. The disaster exposed stark inequalities in disaster response between nations. Desperate survivors searching for loved ones highlighted the human cost and need for global cooperation. If the earthquakes of 2024 shook our sense of security, it was the wildfires that truly ignited our fears. From Canada to the Amazon to California, the skies seemed ablaze with an infernal glow. Fueled by record-breaking temperatures and droughts, these fires raged with unprecedented ferocity. Canadian wildfires sent smoke billowing across the continent, blanketing cities and disrupting air travel. Millions of acres were reduced to ash, releasing billions of tons of carbon dioxide. Fires in the Amazon, often described as Earth's lungs, raged at an alarming rate. Many fires were set to clear land for cattle ranching and soybean cultivation. The Amazon, a biodiversity hotspot, was burning at a rate unseen in decades. The 2024 wildfire season was a wake-up call to the world. As the smoke cleared, we faced the reality of a global crisis threatening the future of life on Earth. – 2024 witnessed catastrophic floods that submerged communities globally. From the Ganges Delta in Bangladesh to Venice, Italy, rising waters brought devastation and displacement. In Bangladesh, heavy monsoon rains and glacial meltwater created a humanitarian disaster. Venice faced its worst floods in over 50 years, swamping St. Mark's Square and homes. The floods of 2024 were a stark reminder of our planet's interconnected systems. Will we heed this warning and take steps to avert further catastrophe? While natural disasters raged across the globe in 2024, exposing the raw power of the physical world, a different kind of disaster unfolded in the heart of Eastern Europe, a disaster born of human ambition, ideology, and the enduring scourge of war. The conflict in Ukraine, which had erupted in late 2022, casting a long shadow over the geopolitical landscape, entered its third year with no end in sight. The initial shock of invasion giving way to a grim war of attrition. The images emerging from the front lines painted a grim picture. Cities reduced to rubble, their streets scarred by tank tracks and littered with the debris of shattered lives. Hospitals overflowing with the wounded, their corridors echoing with the cries of pain and the hushed whispers of grief. And a relentless stream of refugees, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear, fleeing the violence, seeking safety and solace in neighboring countries already struggling to cope with the influx of displaced persons. The conflict, a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the enduring human capacity for violence, had become a humanitarian catastrophe of immense proportions. Its ripple effects felt far beyond the battlefields of Ukraine. The conflict in Ukraine was not merely a territorial dispute, it was a proxy war, a clash of ideologies and geopolitical ambitions that had drawn in global powers, each seeking to advance their own interests in the ruins of a shattered nation. The United States and its NATO allies, invoking the spectre of Russian expansionism, poured weapons and financial aid into Ukraine, bolstering the country's defenses but also fueling the flames of war, making a negotiated settlement ever more elusive. Russia, meanwhile, facing international condemnation and crippling economic sanctions, doubled down on its military campaign, its propaganda machine working overtime to justify the invasion to its own citizens and discredit the Ukrainian government. The conflict in Ukraine, with its complex web of alliances, historical grievances, and geopolitical calculations, served as a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of our world and the dangerous consequences of unchecked nationalism, militarism, and the pursuit of power at any cost. As the war dragged on, claiming countless lives and displacing millions, the world watched with a mixture of horror, outrage, and a growing sense of helplessness, wondering if this was merely a prelude to a wider conflict, a harbinger of a new era of global instability. The human toll of the conflict in Ukraine was staggering, measured not only in casualties but also in the shattered lives of millions forced to flee their homes. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees estimated that over 10 million Ukrainians had been displaced, creating Europe's largest refugee crisis since the Second World War. The images of the exodus were both heartbreaking and inspiring, mothers clutching their children, elderly couples leaving behind homes they had known for a lifetime, and young men bidding farewell to loved ones. The resilience of the human spirit, even in the face of such adversity, was both humbling and awe-inspiring. The arrival of millions of refugees strained resources and tested the limits of compassion. Governments struggled to provide housing, food, and medical care, while communities grappled with integrating newcomers. The refugee crisis highlighted the interconnectedness of our world and the need for international cooperation. The plight of the Ukrainian refugees served as a stark reminder that the consequences of war extend far beyond the battlefield. As the conflict continued, the world watched with a mixture of compassion and concern, hoping for a swift and peaceful resolution. But even if the guns fell silent tomorrow, the scars of war, both physical and psychological, would linger. While the world's attention was focused on Ukraine, another conflict continued to fester in the Middle East. The Syrian civil war, which erupted in 2011, had morphed into a complex proxy war, a battleground for regional and international powers. The conflict, once dominating headlines, had faded from public consciousness. But for millions of Syrians, the war remained a brutal reality. The images emerging from Syria were no less harrowing: bombed-out hospitals and schools, children gaunt from hunger, and a humanitarian crisis of staggering proportions. The Syrian government, backed by Russia and Iran, had regained control of much of the country, but at a terrible cost. The opposition, a fragmented collection of rebel groups, clung to pockets of control, their hopes of toppling the Assad regime fading. And caught in the middle, the Syrian people yearned for peace, for a chance to rebuild their lives. The Syrian civil war served as a cautionary tale for a world grappling with rising tensions and the proliferation of weapons. As the conflict entered its second decade, the world watched with a mixture of fatigue and helplessness, wondering if peace would ever be possible in this war-torn land, or if the cycle of violence would continue to spin. While bombs and bullets exacted a terrible toll, economic sanctions inflicted their own kind of pain, a slow, grinding pressure that crippled economies and isolated populations. Economic sanctions, once hailed as a humane alternative to military intervention, had become a ubiquitous tool of foreign policy. In 2024, the world witnessed the devastating impact of economic sanctions on a scale rarely seen before. The sanctions imposed on Russia in response to its invasion of Ukraine had far-reaching consequences. Rippling through the global economy, the value of the ruble plummeted, inflation soared, and ordinary Russians struggled to afford basic necessities. The sanctions also had unintended consequences, exacerbating existing global challenges. The disruption of energy markets sent shockwaves through Europe, driving up energy prices and fueling inflation. The sanctions impacted global food security, disrupting supply chains and driving up food prices. The use of economic sanctions raised complex ethical and moral questions. While proponents argued they were necessary, critics pointed to their indiscriminate nature, harming the most vulnerable. The debate over sanctions, their effectiveness, and their unintended consequences was likely to continue, reflecting the complex challenges facing a world grappling with conflict and inequality. As we survey the wreckage of 2024, it's hard not to draw parallels with the apocalyptic visions that have haunted the human imagination for centuries. The Book of Revelation, with its cryptic language and vivid imagery, has long served as a source of both fascination and fear. Written in the late 1st century AD, Revelation is a book steeped in symbolism. Its author, John of Patmos, drew on a rich tapestry of biblical prophecy and Roman imperial imagery. The book describes a cosmic battle between good and evil, culminating in the return of Christ and the establishment of a new heaven and a new earth. While interpretations of Revelation vary, the book's central message of a world in crisis resonates with unsettling familiarity. The parallels are striking, fueling a sense that we are living in a time of unprecedented upheaval. It's tempting to dismiss these parallels as mere coincidence, but our world remains a precarious and unpredictable place. The question is not whether we are living in the end times, but whether we have the wisdom and the will to confront the challenges before us and chart a new course for humanity. Perhaps the most enduring image from Revelation is that of the four horsemen, harbingers of chaos and destruction. The white horseman, symbolizing conquest, rides forth with a bow and crown. The red horseman, astride a fiery steed, represents war, wielding a great sword. The black horseman, riding a black horse and carrying a pair of scales, embodies famine. And finally, the pale horseman, riding a pale horse and known as Death, follows in their wake. While these horsemen have long captured the imagination, their symbolic power transcends any literal interpretation. They represent the interconnected forces of conflict, hunger, disease, and death that have plagued humanity throughout its history. In 2024, the echoes of the Four Horsemen's ride could be felt across the globe. The conflict in Ukraine embodied the destructive power of the Red Horseman. The Black Horseman's presence was felt in soaring food prices and growing hunger. The Pale Horseman cast a long shadow over 2024. The COVID-19 pandemic continued to claim lives, particularly in developing countries. The earthquakes, floods, and wildfires added to the death toll, leaving behind a trail of grief and despair. And as the year drew to a close, a sense of foreboding lingered, a feeling that the Four Horsemen would continue to ride. While war and famine often dominate headlines, it is the Pale Horseman, Death, who ultimately claims us all. In 2024, the Pale Horseman's presence was felt with particular force, fueled by violence, deprivation, and environmental degradation. The heat waves that scorched parts of the world were a stark reminder of the deadly consequences of a warming planet. The floods that submerged communities highlighted the vulnerability of coastal populations to rising sea levels. And the wildfires that raged across the globe served as a fiery testament to the interconnectedness of our planet's systems. The Pale Horseman's harvest was not limited to these dramatic events. It was also felt in the slow, insidious creep of pollution and the loss of biodiversity. The World Health Organization estimates that air pollution alone is responsible for millions of premature deaths each year. The Pale Horseman's presence serves as a stark reminder of our own mortality and the interconnectedness of all life on Earth. We are part of a complex web of life, our fate linked to the health of the planet. Ignoring this reality amounts to a collective death wish, a slow suicide pact with the forces of entropy and decay. In the face of overwhelming challenges, it's easy to succumb to despair, but the Book of Revelation offers a message of hope, a promise of refuge and redemption. Throughout history, people have sought solace and guidance in times of crisis. In the aftermath of natural disasters, we've witnessed countless acts of compassion and resilience. The challenges we face in the 21st century demand a collective response that transcends national borders and ideological divides, addressing climate change, resolving conflicts peacefully, and creating a more just world will require a fundamental shift in our values and behaviors. We must move beyond self-interest and embrace a vision of our interconnectedness. We must harness innovation and technology to create a sustainable future, and we must rediscover the importance of empathy, compassion, and cooperation. While ancient prophecies offer one lens through which to view the tumultuous events of our time, the scientific community provides a different, though no less alarming, perspective. The evidence is irrefutable. Our planet is warming at an unprecedented rate, and human activity is the primary driver of this change. This is not a matter of speculation or conjecture. It is a scientific consensus, supported by decades of rigorous research and overwhelming evidence. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has concluded with over 95% certainty that human activities, primarily the burning of fossil fuels, are the dominant cause of the observed warming since the mid-20th century. The Earth, our home, is a complex and interconnected system. Climate change, driven by human activities, is disrupting this balance. One of the most visible impacts is the rise in global sea levels. Glaciers and ice sheets melt, adding more water to the oceans. Climate change is also altering weather patterns, making extreme weather events more frequent and intense. While natural climate variability has always played a role in shaping our planet, the rapid warming observed in recent decades cannot be explained by natural factors alone. The scientific evidence overwhelmingly points to human activities, particularly the burning of fossil fuels. The fingerprint of human influence on the climate system is evident. The warming trend is most pronounced in the troposphere, where greenhouse gases are concentrated. The stratosphere has actually cooled slightly. This pattern is consistent with the warming effect of greenhouse gases and inconsistent with changes in solar radiation. The isotopic composition of carbon dioxide has changed due to fossil fuel burning. The evidence is clear. Human activities are altering the Earth's climate system. The time for action is now. Climate change is real, happening now and caused by human activities. Its impacts are felt globally, threatening billions and ecosystems. We have the tools to address this challenge. Transition to cleaner energy, reduce fossil fuels, invest in efficiency, and promote sustainable land use. Adapt to sea level rise and extreme weather, strengthen infrastructure, develop early warning systems. Addressing climate change is an economic opportunity. Invest in clean energy, create jobs, stimulate innovation, reduce dependence on fossil fuels, improve public health, promote active transportation. Act now with urgency and determination. Create a sustainable and equitable future. The future of humanity depends on it. The year 2024 has laid bare a stark and unsettling truth. Natural and human-made disasters are not isolated incidents, but rather interconnected threads woven into the complex tapestry of our world. They intersect and amplify each other, creating a perfect storm of vulnerability, particularly for those living on the front lines of poverty, conflict, and environmental degradation. The conflict in Ukraine, with its devastating human toll and geopolitical shockwaves, provides a stark illustration of this interconnectedness. The war itself, a man-made catastrophe fueled by greed, ambition, and historical grievances, has displaced millions, disrupted global supply chains, and exacerbated food insecurity, particularly in regions already grappling with the impacts of climate change and poverty. The war's impact on Ukraine's agricultural sector, once a breadbasket for Europe, has been particularly devastating. Fields lie fallow, littered with landmines and unexploded ordnance. Farmers have been forced to flee their homes, their livelihoods destroyed, and the blockade of Ukrainian ports has choked off exports, sending shockwaves through global grain markets and driving up food prices, pushing millions more people into hunger and poverty. This convergence of conflict and climate change is creating a vicious cycle, trapping the most vulnerable in a downward spiral of displacement, poverty, and hunger. As resources become scarcer, competition for land, water, and food intensifies, fueling tensions and increasing the risk of further conflict. The lines between natural and human-made disasters blur, and the human cost of inaction becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. Fragile states struggle with conflict, climate change, and poverty. Weak governance and limited resources make them vulnerable. Somalia faces civil war, poverty, and severe drought. In 2024, Somalia experienced its worst drought in decades. Crops failed, livestock died, and millions faced starvation. The humanitarian crisis worsened with overflowing camps. The drought is a complex catastrophe, worsened by conflict and poverty. It's a call for global action to address these interconnected challenges. Displacement from conflict, persecution, and climate change is at record levels, with over 100 million people affected globally. This crisis is driven by conflicts, political instability, and climate change impacts. Climate change exacerbates displacement through extreme weather events. Displaced individuals face dangerous journeys and harsh conditions. Many endure overcrowded camps with limited resources. A coordinated global response is essential to address this crisis. Section 4. A cycle of vulnerability. The interconnectedness of natural and human-made disasters creates a vicious cycle of vulnerability, trapping individuals, communities, and entire nations in a downward spiral of poverty, displacement, and conflict. Breaking this cycle requires a fundamental shift in our understanding of these challenges and a commitment to addressing the root causes, rather than simply reacting to the symptoms. Climate change, for example, acts as a threat multiplier, exacerbating existing vulnerabilities and creating new ones. It increases the risk of droughts, floods, and other extreme weather events, which can damage crops, disrupt livelihoods, and displace communities. This, in turn, can lead to increased competition for scarce resources, fueling tensions and increasing the risk of conflict. Similarly, conflict weakens institutions, undermines governance, and diverts resources away from essential services, making countries more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and other shocks. The destruction of infrastructure, displacement of populations, and disruption of markets caused by conflict can take years or even decades to recover from, leaving countries more susceptible to future crises. Breaking this cycle of vulnerability requires a holistic and integrated approach that addresses the interconnected challenges of climate change, conflict, poverty, and displacement. This includes investing in climate resilience, promoting sustainable development, strengthening governance, and supporting peaceful conflict resolution. It also requires a commitment to international cooperation, burden sharing, and a recognition that our interconnected world demands a collective response to shared challenges. At Section 1, the precipice of change. Standing on the precipice of 2025, we find ourselves at a crossroads in human history. The year 2024 has shaken us to our core, forcing us to confront the fragility of our systems. The question is how we will respond to these changes and what kind of future we will create. The challenges before us are immense, their scale and complexity unlike anything humanity has faced before. Yet amidst these daunting challenges, a glimmer of hope persists. The human spirit, though tested, has proven remarkably resilient. Section 2, a crossroads of choice. The path forward is not preordained. The future is something we create through our choices and actions. We can continue down a path of unchecked consumption and conflict, or choose a sustainable path, recognizing our interconnectedness. This requires a shift in values and behaviors, embrace social justice, environmental sustainability, and the common good. Challenge endless consumption and embrace a circular economy. Bridge divides and overcome fear and hatred. Foster dialogue and understanding across cultures. Promote education, critical thinking, and human rights. Confront injustice and inequality. The choices we make now will shape the future. We can squander our inheritance or rise to the challenge. The time for action is now. Amidst the wreckage and despair, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that humanity is not merely a passive victim of circumstance. Throughout history, we have demonstrated an extraordinary capacity for resilience, ingenuity, and compassion, particularly in times of crisis. Seeds of hope are being sown, and shoots of resilience are pushing through the cracks of our broken systems. A new generation of activists, entrepreneurs, and innovators is rising to the challenge, demanding change and creating solutions. We are witnessing a growing awareness of our interconnectedness, sharing a common destiny. The challenges of the 21st century demand a new narrative, one that transcends our current paradigms. It must embrace a more expansive vision of what it means to be human in an interconnected world. Rooted in understanding our place in the web of life, recognizing our well-being is linked to the planet's health. This narrative must challenge individualism and competition, promoting cooperation and shared responsibility. It must recognize the interconnectedness of our challenges, understanding that climate change, poverty, and conflict are symptoms of a deeper crisis. This new narrative empowers individuals and communities to shape their destinies, celebrating diversity as a source of strength. Grounded in hope, it believes in a world where peace, justice, and sustainability prevail. Creating this narrative is a collective endeavor for everyone, reimagining our relationship with each other and the planet. It calls us to rediscover our shared humanity and step boldly into a future we create together. As we stand at the cusp of a new year, the echoes of 2024's tumultuous events still reverberate through our collective consciousness. The images linger: ravaged landscapes scorched by wildfires, cities inundated by floods, the faces of refugees etched with exhaustion and uncertainty. It would be easy to succumb to despair, to view these events as harbingers of an inevitable decline, yet within us lies an indomitable spirit, a capacity for resilience, compassion, and innovation that has seen us through countless challenges throughout history. The crises we face today are a call to action, an invitation to reimagine our relationship with our planet, with each other, and with ourselves. This interconnectedness offers a glimmer of hope. Small acts of courage, compassion, and innovation can ripple outwards, creating a cascade of positive change. We are members of a global community, bound together by a shared destiny and a responsibility for the well-being of all. In the face of daunting challenges, it can be tempting to succumb to apathy or despair. Yet history teaches us that hope is an active choice, a commitment to envisioning and working towards a better future. Hope is the spark that ignites action, the fuel that sustains us through difficult times. It is about recognizing that the future is not preordained. Hope is about finding the courage to imagine a different world and dedicating ourselves to making that vision a reality. Hope is not a luxury, it is an imperative. And the year 2024 has been a year of reckoning, a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of our world. But it has also been a year of awakening, a time for transformative change. The challenges we face are complex but not insurmountable. We have the knowledge and resources to address them. What we need now is the courage to act and the wisdom to choose cooperation. The time for complacency is over. This is the moment to summon our collective courage and rise to the challenges of our time. Let us choose to be the generation that turned the tide and created a future worthy of our children.